Have you ever worked somewhere for years and still felt like no one knew your name? Have you ever been the first one and the last one out, yet never invited to sit at the table? What if the person pushing the mop secretly owned the building? And what if one morning she decided to stop being invisible? This isn't a fantasy, it happened. And her name is Clara Thompson. In today's story, you'll witness a woman everyone overlooked. Stand up, speak out, and quietly flip the power structure of an entire company. You'll hear how one public humiliation became the spark for a revolution. You'll follow Clara as she gathers hidden evidence, exposes corporate corruption, and redefines what it means to lead with compassion, not control. And finally, you'll see how her courage rippled far beyond boardrooms, reaching janitors, interns, and everyday people who thought their voices didn't matter. But before all that, Clara was just someone everyone walked past. No eye contact, no good morning, just the quiet shuffle of her mop on cold marble floors, until one Tuesday morning when someone spilled coffee and laughed just a little too loud. That's when everything began to change. Let me take you back to where it all started. Downtown Chicago, towering glass, a name you've probably never heard. Pinnacle Enterprises. And Clara. She was already inside. For 15 years, Clara Thompson walked the same hallways, pushed the same cart, and wore the same navy blue uniform. She knew every squeaky tile on the 32nd floor of Pinnacle Enterprises, knew which elevator stalled, which window caught the morning sun just right, and which office Victor Lang's corner suite always smelled of burnt coffee and ego. But no one really saw her. Not the executives in tailored suits who breezed past without a glance. Not the interns who avoided eye contact when she emptied their trash. Not even the receptionist who once whispered "wrong floor" when Clara stepped too close to the company's main conference room. To them, she was just background, functional, silent, a moving fixture with a mop. And Clara. She didn't complain. She showed up. She worked hard. She learned to blend in not because she wanted to, but because it was easier than reminding people she existed. In a world that rewards loud voices and shiny resumes, Clara understood that being quiet made her forgettable and safe. But here's the thing about silence: sometimes it holds more power than noise. Every day, Clara noticed things no one else did. A whisper here, a file left open there, the tired look in someone's eyes just before they were called into Victor's office, and the even more tired look when they came out holding a cardboard box. She remembered names, remembered stories, like Ellie from payroll, who used to bring cookies on Fridays until she got laid off for budget cuts 3 weeks after maternity leave, or Ramon the janitor, who asked for an ergonomic mop because of his back pain and never came back after that request. The stories stayed with Clara one after another like fingerprints on a glass door, faint but still there, still real, and still ignored. In truth, what made Clara invisible wasn't the uniform. It was how the company was built to overlook people like her. If you weren't making deals or managing portfolios, your presence was barely tolerated, let alone valued. But Clara didn't see herself as a victim. She saw herself as a witness. And that's the thing people forget. Those who clean the floors also hear the footsteps. The lesson here is simple. Never underestimate the quiet ones, especially the ones who keep coming back. They're not weak. They're waiting, watching, choosing their moment. And Clara, well, her moment was coming, because one morning someone spilled coffee, and someone else laughed a little too loud. Let's talk about that moment. Clara never set out to collect secrets. But when you're the one cleaning the offices after everyone else goes home, the walls talk, and if you're quiet long enough, they start telling you everything. Each night while the city of Chicago blinked through its skyline and the building emptied out, Clara moved silently between cubicles and boardrooms. Her mop glided over marble floors, still echoing with the day's power plays. Coffee cups left behind. Paper trails not fully erased. Conversations half finished but fully revealing. Victor Lang's office was the worst. Every night Clara would step into that glass-walled kingdom and find it in the same disarray: crumpled papers on the floor, stained mugs, remnants of fast food. The chaos wasn't just physical. It was a reflection of something deeper, something careless, something entitled. She once saw Victor shred a thick stack of documents with a smirk, then toss the empty folder into the trash. A moment later, he made a joke to someone on the phone about trimming the fat. Another time, she passed by his door just as he barked at a manager for not firing fast enough. Clara didn't flinch. She didn't interrupt. But she remembered. She remembered the woman from HR, Diana, who used to say good morning every day. Then one afternoon, Diana's desk was cleared out, her name removed from the email list, and no one mentioned her again. She remembered the maintenance guy who fixed the elevators at night. Quiet, polite, gone without warning. And she remembered the look on Victor's face each time he fired someone, like he was swatting a fly, not ending a career. The truth is, Clara saw it all. She just didn't say anything. Not yet. And here's where it gets real. Powerful people rarely worry about being watched by those they believe are beneath them. But they forget those people are the ones closest to the ground. And when you're at ground level, you see what's really falling apart. Clara started noticing patterns. Budget reports didn't match what she overheard on Victor's calls. Names vanished from office doors faster than promotions were handed out. And the jokes, always at the expense of the little people. She wasn't just cleaning anymore. She was connecting dots. And deep down, a quiet question began to take shape. What if someone wrote all this down? What if the person no one saw was the one who saw everything? The lesson in this part of her story isn't just about observation. It's about paying attention even when no one pays attention to you. Because sometimes watching is a kind of resistance. And remembering, that's the first step to exposing the truth. Clara kept cleaning, kept listening, kept waiting, until one Tuesday morning when everything changed. Not because of some grand scandal, but because someone spilled a cup of coffee and someone else decided it was okay to humiliate the cleaning lady in front of the entire staff. Let's talk about that Tuesday. Clara Thompson had a secret, a quiet, powerful secret that not even the people closest to her at Pinnacle Enterprises knew. 15 years earlier, when Clara's Uncle Quincy passed away, he didn't leave her a house. He didn't leave jewelry or money in a safe. What he left was something far less shiny but infinitely more valuable. Shares, a significant stake in Pinnacle Enterprises. Uncle Quincy had been one of the company's early backers, a quiet investor much like Clara herself. He believed in building wealth that wasn't loud, just lasting. And in his will, he left his shares to his niece, the one person he said understood what dignity means when no one's looking. At the time, Clara was stunned. She wasn't a businesswoman. She didn't speak corporate. She barely had time to grieve, let alone imagine herself as a shareholder. But she also didn't sell. She held on to those shares the way she held on to her mop, steady, unshaken. Why? Because Clara believed in watching before acting. Because something about the company felt broken, and she needed time to understand just how deep the cracks ran. And because, truthfully, she wasn't ready. Not yet. You see, there's a difference between having power and knowing how to use it. For years, Clara watched Pinnacle change. She saw good people let go and bad ones promoted. She saw values traded for profits, promises broken in boardrooms she wasn't allowed to enter. And through it all, she stayed quiet. Not because she was afraid, but because she knew when it was time to speak, they would have to listen. The irony was never lost on her. She'd be wiping down the windows of a building she partly owned, listening to a supervisor bark orders at someone who technically reported to her. She once overheard two managers laughing about the cleaning lady who looks like she's been here forever, not knowing the same woman signed off on more shares than both of them combined. But Clara didn't interrupt. She didn't correct them. Because people reveal who they are when they think no one important is watching. And Clara had learned that her silence bought her access to truths others weren't supposed to see. Still, the question lingers. Why 15 years? Why not walk into a board meeting and declare her place the moment those shares became hers? The answer is simple and deeply human, because timing matters. Because when you've spent a lifetime being talked over, sometimes you wait, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. And Clara waited for a moment that would justify her voice, not for herself, but for every person who had been fired without fairness, overworked without recognition, humiliated without cause. She waited until someone spilled coffee at her feet and called her grandma in front of a crowd. That was the moment she stopped waiting. That humiliation, it wasn't the first, but it was the last. And as she stood there, mop in hand and cheeks burning, she knew it's time. She called Tom that night. Tom, the only lawyer she trusted. Tom, who once said to her, "You may not wear the suit, Clara, but you hold the keys." They met at a diner across town, plastic booths, greasy fries, and a folder full of receipts Clara had been tucking away for years. As Tom flipped through pages of misused budgets, shredded memos, and unethical layoffs, he looked up and said, "Clara, you're not just a shareholder, you're the majority shareholder." She nodded slow. "And I'm ready to use it, because waiting can be wise. But knowing when to stop waiting, that's when power becomes purpose." And Clara, she was about to turn her purpose into a plan. Let's talk about what happened next. It happened on a Tuesday, a day like any other. The air was crisp, the lobby smelled faintly of fresh polish, and Clara was doing what she always did, mopping quietly, head down, eyes open. She was near the elevators when she heard the laughter. Victor Lang, flanked by his usual entourage of yes men, sauntered into the building. Loud, confident, untouchable, the kind of entrance he probably practiced in the mirror. Someone in his group spilled coffee hazelnut by the smell of it right near Clara's bucket. Victor didn't break stride. He pointed at her and said loud enough for the entire lobby to hear, "Clean it up, Grandma. That's what we pay you for, right?" The words hung in the air like smoke. Sharp, stinging, unapologetic. The security guards paused. The receptionist stopped typing. A few junior staffers looked away, pretending not to hear. And then they laughed. Not all of them, but enough. A ripple of forced chuckles followed Victor as he walked toward the elevator, smirking like he just nailed a punchline on live TV. Clara stood still. Her hands gripped the mop tighter. Her knuckles went white. Her heart pounded in her ears. She didn't say a word. She just bent down, started wiping the floor, and swallowed the burn in her chest like she had so many times before. But something shifted in her that morning. Not because it was the first time she'd been mocked, but because it was the last time she'd stay silent. You see, Clara had endured 1,000 small humiliations over the years. Being called sweetie by men half her age, being talked over in break rooms, being handed trash bags like she didn't have a name or a past or a stake in anything that mattered. She told herself it wasn't personal, that it was just part of the job, that dignity meant rising above it. But that day, that public laugh, it wasn't just disrespect. It was a dismissal of everything she was. Everything she had built, learned, and held back for so long. And that was the moment Clara made a decision. Not out of rage, but out of resolve. That night in her small apartment with the bleach-scented uniform still hanging by the door, she pulled out a shoebox from under her bed. Inside were pages of notes, printouts, photos, years of quiet documentation. She opened her phone, scrolled to Tom's contact, and hit call. When he picked up, she said just 5 words, "Tom, it's time. Let's begin." Because sometimes the strongest moves are made not in anger, but in clarity. And Clara, she had never seen things clearer. The lesson here isn't about revenge. It's about recognition, about knowing the difference between staying patient and being passive. Clara had waited long enough. Now she was ready to act with precision, with proof, and with purpose. And as she and Tom mapped out their next steps over coffee-stained blueprints and wrinkled receipts, a plan started to form. Not just to confront Victor Lang, but to end his reign for good. Let's talk about how that plan unfolded. Clara had never seen herself as a detective, but that week, pushing her mop through Pinnacle's polished hallways, she wasn't just cleaning, she was collecting. Each night while most of the city slept, Clara waged a quiet war. No shouting, no breaking rules, just steady, methodical observation. And a phone camera that didn't miss much. Victor's corner office was still the mess it had always been, but now Clara saw it differently. It wasn't chaos, it was carelessness. And carelessness leaves traces. She snapped photos of shredded documents he left too close to the bin. She scanned budget notes with numbers that didn't add up. She printed emails left open on screens after someone forgot to log out. Each piece felt small on its own, but when Tom began assembling them like puzzle pieces, a pattern emerged. Fraud, harassment, misuse of company funds. Victor hadn't just been arrogant, he'd been sloppy. And Clara had been there to witness it all. She'd slip into the copy room after hours, heart-racing fingers, trembling as she fed incriminating pages into the scanner. She dug old emails out of recycling bins, labeled them with sticky notes, and hid them under the false bottom of her cleaning cart. By day, she nodded politely to the very men she was gathering evidence against. By night, she and Tom built a case that could shake the company from the inside out. There were nights Clara couldn't sleep. She'd sit at her tiny kitchen table surrounded by manila folders, sipping lukewarm tea and wondering what would happen if she was caught. Would they fire her? Try to silence her, turn the whole thing against her? But then she'd remember Ellie from payroll, Miguel from maintenance, the quiet ones who left without warning and without justice, and she'd whisper to herself, keep going. Because here's the truth no one likes to admit. Sometimes justice doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts in copy rooms, with one person refusing to look away. Clara wasn't out for fame. She wasn't even out for revenge. She was out for the truth. And truth she knew had a habit of coming out no matter how tightly it's sealed. Tom texted her one night, "It's airtight now. We're ready." She stared at the message for a long time. She thought about her uncle, about the shares, about the trust he'd placed in her, about the years she stayed silent, watching others get hurt. And she thought about that mop, that bucket, that laugh in the lobby. This wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel small by someone with a louder voice and a fancier title. Clara looked at the calendar. The shareholders' meeting was 1 week away, and she was done waiting. Let's talk about the day she walked in with her card, her papers, and a quiet kind of thunder. The morning of the shareholders' meeting, Clara woke before the sun. She didn't rush. She didn't panic. She made her tea, tied her hair back the same way she always did, and buttoned up her navy blue uniform for what might be the last time. In her hand, she held a small folder. Inside truth, evidence, receipts, 15 years of silence condensed into paper and ink. And in her heart, a quiet, steady fire. She walked through the front doors of Pinnacle like it was any other day. Her cleaning cart rattled over the marble floors. The receptionist barely looked up. Victor was already in the boardroom laughing from what she could hear, likely cracking another joke about quarterly numbers or people he'd cut loose. Clara waited just outside, breathing slow. She could feel the weight of every step that brought her here. Tom's text came through now. She pushed the door open. At first, no one noticed. A few board members glanced up, puzzled. Victor's smirk widened. "What's she doing here?" he barked, motioning to Clara with a wave of his hand. "Somebody spill something." A couple of chuckles followed, nervous, dismissive. But Clara didn't flinch. She stepped forward, set her folder gently on the table, and looked Victor right in the eye. "I'm not just the cleaning lady," she said softly, her voice steady. "I'm the majority shareholder of Pinnacle Enterprises, and I'm here to make a motion." Silence. A thick, heavy silence that seemed to suck the air out of the room. Someone dropped their pen. Another shifted in their seat. Victor blinked, then scoffed. "This some kind of joke," he sneered. "Sweetheart, you don't even have a seat at this table." Clara opened the folder. She began to read clearly, calmly, the list of violations Victor had overseen. Falsified reports, misused funds, email excerpts referring to staff as expendable. She passed around copies. Tom entered the room behind her, handing out legal confirmations of her shareholdings in a formal motion to remove Victor Lang as CEO. By the time she finished reading, the room was silent again. But it wasn't the same kind of silence. It was the kind that follows impact. The kind that means something just shifted and it's not going back. Clara straightened her back. "I have the shares," she said, "and I have the votes." Victor stood up, face flushed. "You can't do this." "Oh, I already have," she replied. And with that, the boardroom changed. Not just in leadership, but in spirit. The lesson here isn't just about taking back power. It's about knowing your worth even when no one else sees it. Because sometimes the loudest person in the room isn't the one speaking. It's the one who's waited long enough. Victor stormed out, muttering threats that no one took seriously anymore. Clara turned back to the room. There will be no more layoffs to boost profit margins. No more treating staff like they don't matter. That ends today. Some nodded, a few clapped. Others simply stared stunned at the woman they'd seen every day and never really seen at all. And just before she left the room, Clara did one more thing. She pulled out her phone and showed a photo of the night crew, the janitors, the cleaners, the maintenance team. These people deserve better. They're getting raises effective immediately. This time the applause came louder. Real, honest, earned. For the first time in 15 years, Clara didn't feel invisible. She felt necessary. And as she wheeled her cart out of that boardroom, she didn't leave empty-handed. She left as the new leader of the company. But this wasn't the end, because what happened after she took charge was just as remarkable. Let's talk about what came next when the headlines exploded and the world finally started paying attention. By the time Clara got home that night, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. She'd barely kicked off her shoes when Tom called. "You're trending," he said, half laughing, half stunned. Cleaning Lady ousts CEO boardroom. Coup one headline read, "Janitor turned shareholder takes down corporate giant," said another. Her inbox overflowed. Messages from former coworkers, from strangers, from news outlets. Some were cheering, others were crying. But almost all of them said the same thing: "Thank you. You made us believe again." Victor Lang, on the other hand, didn't disappear quietly. That just wasn't his style. Within 24 hours, a video clip surfaced, security footage from right after the meeting. Victor, red-faced and raging, was seen trashing his office, throwing papers, kicking a chair, screaming into his phone. The clip went viral. By morning, the hashtags were everywhere. Victor meltdown, shock Clara for CEO, shock corporate justice. Someone even remixed the clip with dramatic violin music and posted it to TikTok. 10 million views by lunch. The fall was fast and merciless. Regulatory agencies opened investigations thanks to the files Clara and Tom had turned over. Frozen accounts, a seized yacht, a quiet but thorough dismantling of the empire Victor had built on arrogance and fear. Investors scrambled to distance themselves. Board members who once praised him now denied ever backing his decisions. His name, once whispered with awe in corporate circles, was now a punchline. Victor tried to spin the story, of course. He gave an interview on a low-tier business channel calling Clara a sneaky janitor who stole my legacy. But the world had already chosen sides, and it wasn't his. People weren't rooting for power anymore. They were rooting for Clara, because in a time where so many feel powerless, her story felt like a window cracking open. A reminder that even those written off can still rewrite the rules. The lesson: sometimes the people you step on, climbing the ladder, are the ones holding it steady. And when they decide to move, you fall. But Clara wasn't gloating. She wasn't even celebrating. She was working. She spent the next day back at Pinnacle, not in heels or some designer suit, but in her favorite jeans and a soft sweater. She met with the cleaning crew in the break room. They cheered. One brought her a coffee. Another hugged her tight. "You did it," someone whispered. "I did what was right," Clara replied. Later that afternoon, she sat at Victor's old desk. Same view, same skyline, different soul. She opened the suggestion box she'd had installed the week before. The first note inside read, "More coffee, please." She laughed. Because sometimes victory doesn't feel like confetti and parades. Sometimes it feels like laughter. Like a coffee shared between co-workers who finally feel seen. Like silence that's no longer heavy, but peaceful. And as the sun dipped behind the Chicago skyline, Clara looked out the window. Not as the woman no one saw, but as the leader no one could ignore anymore. But even with Victor gone and her name now on the front page, Clara knew something: the work wasn't finished. Not even close. Because changing a company takes more than removing one man. It takes rebuilding trust. One day, one decision, one voice at a time. Let's talk about how Clara started doing exactly that, starting with a little girl, a heartfelt message, and a future she never expected to shape. Clara didn't change overnight. She didn't walk into Victor's old office and suddenly start speaking in corporate jargon or demanding quarterly projections. Instead, she did something most CEOs don't. She listened. The first official act she made as interim CEO wasn't a policy announcement or a press conference. It was a quiet walk down the service hallway, coffee in hand, toward the break room where the night shift crew gathered every evening. They were startled to see her, not because of who she was now, but because she showed up. "Tell me what you need," she said, sliding into a plastic chair. At first, no one spoke. Then Miguel, one of the senior janitors, cleared his throat. "Well, the gloves we use rip too easy, and the carts, they squeak so loud it's embarrassing." Clara nodded. "Done." Another woman chimed in. "Our hours keep shifting. Makes it hard to get daycare." "Let's fix that too," Clara said. It wasn't about grand gestures. It was about paying attention to the small things, the overlooked things, the same things she'd lived with for 15 years. That week, she approved funding for ergonomic tools, new uniforms, and yes, another coffee machine. Because the first suggestion note she ever read simply said, "More coffee, please." She framed it and put it on her desk. Not as a joke, but as a reminder. Because Clara believed real power wasn't measured in how many people you control, but in how many people you lift. She made time for every department, not just the top floors. She walked the halls, asked questions, and when someone spoke, she actually listened. Slowly, the energy in the building changed. People smiled more. Break room chatter grew louder. Eye contact returned. And the fear, the tension that had hung in the air like a storm cloud under Victor's reign, it started to fade. One afternoon, Clara received an email from someone she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You inspired my daughter." Inside was a note from Miguel. "My little girl saw your interview on TV," it said. "She wants to be just like you someday." Clara read it twice. Then she blinked back tears, sat back in her chair and whispered, "Tell her she can be better than me." Because that's what she believed. That power should never be about building a throne. It should be about opening doors. Leadership isn't about status. It's about service. And sometimes the best leaders are the ones who remember what it felt like to be ignored. But Clara's journey wasn't over. Because no matter how much good you do, there's always someone waiting to pull you back down. Let's talk about what happened when Victor tried one last time to take it all back. For a while, it felt like Clara had finally reached solid ground. The storm had passed. The building was calmer, and the people, especially the ones who used to walk with their heads down, had begun to look each other in the eye again. But victories, especially the bold ones, rarely go unchallenged. It started with whispers. A man seen asking questions in the lobby. A phone call to HR from someone pretending to be doing research. A message from Tom late one night, "Victor's asking around about you. Be careful." Clara didn't flinch. She'd stood her ground before, and she was ready to do it again. But then came the lawsuit, filed under a different name full of vague accusations that she manipulated the board, that she coerced votes, that her rise to power had been fraudulent and unethical. It was classic Victor throwing one last punch on the way down. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to stain her legacy, to remind her and everyone else that power, even when broken, can still bite. Tom met her at the office with the papers in hand. "Typical play," he said, scanning the complaint. "No real merit. But he's hoping to rattle you." Clara nodded slowly. "I've dealt with dirt before," she said quietly. "I'll just keep cleaning." They prepared their response, calm, clear, and solid, included notarized copies of her uncle's will, voting records, meeting transcripts. Every move Clara made was legal, documented, and done with integrity. 3 weeks later, the judge dismissed the case, called it frivolous and retaliatory. Victor was ordered to pay legal fees. His few remaining allies faded into silence. His name, already battered, was now boxed in with court losses and social mockery. But even as the headlines quieted, Clara knew what it had cost her. Not money, but peace. Because speaking up isn't free. It demands courage. It invites pushback. It often means standing in the spotlight when all you want is to go back to the shadows. But it's also what makes change possible. When you use your voice, don't be surprised when someone tries to silence it. Just don't let them. Clara walked into Pinnacle the next morning like always. No big announcements, no statement to the press, just a quiet determination. She passed the photo of the cleaning crew framed outside the break room and smiled. She wasn't just defending herself. She was defending every quiet worker who thought no one would stand up for them. And she wasn't done yet. Because sometimes, even after you've won, you realize the real work is just beginning. Let's talk about what Clara chose to build when she finally had the power to shape everything from the ground up. A year had passed since that Tuesday morning when Clara Thompson walked into a boardroom with a mop in one hand and a folder full of truth in the other. So much had changed, but Clara hadn't forgotten where it all began. She still kept the mop, not to use it, but to remind herself. It leaned quietly in the corner of her office beside the framed suggestion note, "More coffee, please." A small symbol of what it means to be overlooked, and what happens when the overlooked start speaking. Pinnacle Enterprises wasn't just a different company on paper. felt different. People lingered longer in hallways to talk. Managers asked questions and listened. The break room had better coffee. The cleaning staff had new uniforms. Turnover dropped. Productivity went up. And for the first time in years, the word trust wasn't a punchline in HR meetings. But more than the numbers, it was the culture that shifted. Because when someone like Clara leads, you remember that empathy doesn't slow things down, it brings people along. One afternoon during a mentoring session, Clara had started for entry-level staff. A young intern raised her hand. "Ms. Thompson," she said nervously, "is it weird to feel proud of a job most people ignore?" Clara smiled. "No, sweetheart," she replied. "That's not weird, that's wisdom." And that was the heart of it. Clara hadn't climbed a corporate ladder. She'd rebuilt it from the bottom up, so that the next person who looked like her, worked like her, or felt invisible like her wouldn't have to climb alone. Her story became a case study in business schools, not because she ran billion-dollar mergers, but because she proved that integrity has a place at the table, and sometimes it walks in with bleach on its sleeves. She got invitations to speak. She said yes to some, no to others. But she always answered emails from the ones who wrote with shaky grammar and real stories. "I work night shifts too," one message said. "You made me feel like I mattered. And isn't that what we're all really hoping for? To matter, to be seen, to leave behind more than just a title, but a change in how people treat each other." Legacy isn't what you build for yourself. It's what you leave behind for others to stand on. One evening, as Clara packed up her things, she paused by the window. The city lights blinked the way they always had. But something felt different. Not in the skyline. In her. She thought about Uncle Quincy, about Victor, about the mop, the laughs, the silence, and everything in between. And then she turned to the camera, the one recording her last message for Pinnacle's new employee orientation. "If you're watching this," she said, "maybe you feel unseen right now. Maybe you're working hard in the background, hoping someone notices. Let me tell you something. I see you, and more importantly, you're not invisible. You're essential." She smiled, a soft, knowing smile. "So speak up when it's time, wait when it's wise, and when you get the chance, hold the door open for someone else." She pressed stop, and just like that, Clara Thompson didn't just change a company. She changed what leadership looked like. If this story moved you, even just a little, share it with someone who needs a reminder that quiet voices can still shake the ground. Subscribe for more true, powerful stories like this one. Because on That Person Was Me, you'll meet everyday people who did extraordinary things. So tell us, who's someone in your life that the world tends to overlook, but you know they're extraordinary? Drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be seen.